What's up, college football addicts? Today, we're going to talk about something that I think is pretty exciting and enjoyable. But first, I have a small favor to ask of you guys. With all of the crazy changes currently sweeping through college football, many of you guys have voiced your concerns about where this sport is headed. And I think your worries are completely valid. I think they're understandable. But just for the duration of this video, I'm asking you to put all of those thoughts on hold. Allow me the chance to share a story with you, one that promises to be a refreshing pause from all of the chaos. So if you're ready, let's roll. Recently, On3's Andy Staples wrote a fantastic article. It was about a dream scenario that I think would be the best case scenario for college football. I'll link it in the description, so make sure that you go check out Andy's article below. In it, he presented a dream scenario where instead of the Big 12 and the ACC just completely falling off and really becoming significantly weaker, like we talked about in our last video, instead they get absorbed into the SEC and the Big 10. And what that does is maybe forms a new 48-team super conference. Now, I know there are hundreds of perfectly logical and valid problems with this scenario, and I'm sure that I'm going to hear from each and every one of you down in the comments on what those are. But just for a moment, can we use our imaginations here? How great would it be for college football if the SEC and the Big 10 could work with the Big 12 and the ACC to figure out a way where everyone in the former Power 5 ranks ends up winning? A scenario where the SEC and the Big 10 take on shared leadership and almost do a draft of the remaining teams in these two conferences. Let's look at Andy's scenario really quickly. I'll show you some slides here on the screen. As we're getting into that, make sure that if you're a college football addict like I am, that you are subscribed to our channel. Do me a quick favor and hit that button. Okay, let's look at this dream scenario. First up, you have what might be the Big Ten's conferences. You have the Big Ten Atlantic. Let's say you end up there with Penn State, Florida State, North Carolina, Virginia, Pittsburgh, and Maryland. A blend, a marriage here of Big Ten teams, really just Penn State, and what we assume will be Florida State soon, and current Maryland, along with North Carolina, Virginia, Pittsburgh, some ACC schools. Heck, Maryland was a former ACC school at one point. There's been a lot of chaos, a lot of chatter, a lot of speculation that within all of this chaos, you might end up having Penn State and Florida State be natural rivals in the Big Ten. That'd kind of be fun. Some historic matchups there in the past. A 3-overtime bowl game, and then some Bowden-Paterno stuff. That'd be a lot of fun to relive. Big Ten Atlantic would be a lot of fun. What about the Big Ten East-ish or Midwest? Well, Michigan, Michigan State, Notre Dame would be a lot of fun there. You'd have Indiana, Purdue, and Rutgers that you could add to that one as well. Michigan and Michigan State, obviously that rivalry exists well and strong. But then add Notre Dame in would be a lot of fun for it, right? Michigan and Notre Dame would play annually. Michigan State, Notre Dame, likely to play annually as well. The Big Ten East or the Big Ten Midwest, a good balance of power there. How about the Big Ten West or West-ish? Ohio State certainly would dominate this, it would seem, but you'd have Ohio State, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota in there. Wisconsin maybe can get their footing back. Maybe they can get to a point where they are certainly competing and more relevant on a yearly basis like they have been in the past. The Big Ten West would be your California schools, and then you'd add in a couple other programs that maybe make sense. Programs like UCLA, USC, Oregon, Washington, Utah, and then Nebraska in that Big Ten West. Your West Coast flavor, your Nebraska would certainly be maybe not the happiest about this. Maybe they wouldn't love the way this goes down, but that'd certainly be a way to do a Big Ten West. The SEC Atlantic, again, mirroring what you had there with the Big Ten. You'd have Florida, Georgia, Clemson, NC State, South Carolina, and Miami. The brand power in that division is ridiculous. Florida, Georgia, Clemson, and Miami all together. And then some really solid kind of tier B teams in South Carolina and NC State. He had an SEC Moonshine Conference, Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Virginia Tech. I do think that one's pretty fun. I do think Alabama, Auburn, obviously at the top there, but Tennessee obviously bringing a lot of strength as well. The SEC Mid-South, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Missouri, LSU, and Vanderbilt. And then the SEC Southwest. You've got a lot of Texas schools here. Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State round out what your SEC Southwest might look like. So you've added some teams from the ACC. You've added some teams from the Big 12. You've obviously got your Big 10 and your SEC schools as well. But after we run through that dream scenario, be honest with me. Do you think that this would be better for college football? Do you think that this would be more enjoyable? Let's talk about that down below. I know some of you out there are thinking that there's absolutely no way that the SEC and Big Ten would ever consider adding teams like Kansas State, West Virginia. And let me tell you, I agree. This absolutely could not happen unless the lesser valued teams agreed to accept an amount that was far less than what the current SEC and Big Ten teams are making. The bottom line is this: none of the top teams are willing to have their revenue cut, and honestly, you wouldn't either. There would certainly need to be two separate pay tiers to make this type of league work, maybe even three if you think about all things considered. Perhaps you even separate it by the amount of teams that were willing to invest in their football programs each year and how much each team was willing to invest into their football program each year. And maybe everyone pays an equal price for refs and the new version of the conference level version of the NCAA. But there's no reason that the SEC and the Big Ten couldn't help coordinate, negotiate, and land these teams equal or more money than they're currently making in the ACC and the Big 12. So just to rehash, I'm not arguing for equal revenue sharing across 48 teams, but I do think that there is a way. Also, I know that Andy left some teams out in his 48-team model. Teams like Wake Forest and Boston College, and I'm fine with this. But I'd also say that if those teams are willing to pay the minimum investment threshold for football, the league should be willing to expand to accommodate them and work out a TV deal that could scale in that scenario. The big problem is that a lot of teams want to continue to cash checks. They want to continue to take money in from these conferences, whether it's the ACC, whether it's the SEC, and they refuse to invest in athletics. They refuse to invest in the sports that are generating them the funds, the revenue. College football has never been fair and has always been dominated by a few teams. But by creating a super league, you could go a long way to keeping the sport that we love a lot closer to what we fell in love with, as opposed to what we are being told is coming very soon. Some people are going to say, hey, I hate this idea. I don't think it would work. I just want football to go back to the way that it was. Football 10 years ago is never coming back. And so to me, I really like Andy's scenario here because I think it's the closest that we could get to that. I think it's the closest that we could get to football as we knew it. Otherwise, not taking this scenario as a possibility, not taking this scenario as what we would potentially move toward means we're going to go even further off the other way. Now, I know that this is all a dream. The egos in the room are just too big for this. And no one in the room is willing to place what's in the best interest of college football over themselves. But we can dream about it. And while we can still dream about it, we better do just that. Because very soon, the sport that we know and love and respect and have all the admiration in the world for is going to be unlike anything we've ever seen. And I'm not saying it's going to be bad. I'm not saying that we won't still love it. But for those who love history for the sake of history, it's going to be different very soon than it ever has been before. Make sure that you are subscribed here to College Football Addiction. We've got some new, exciting things coming. We are very much closing in on that 5,000 subscriber mark in under 2 months. Help us get there. We appreciate you guys, as always, for watching College Football Addiction.